Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing? Thanks for coming on this Friday, where we're doing Enescu, Cantabile, and Presto warm-ups, as well as a little bit of a Q&A session. I have one question at the moment on standby. So if you have any questions, please write them in the comment or the chat here, because then I can help you with whatever you have any struggles with, or if you've just got some opinions about something that you want to ask my opinion as well, that's fine. Oh, good. Okay, so yeah, please just leave them in the chat there, and I will read those when we get to the that section. And I'll spend quite a good chunk of time on the Enescu, simply because there's so much to talk about in this piece. It's such a good piece, and there's so many warm-ups you could do based on it, but we'll try and cover as much as possible. So first thing about the cantabile is, for me at least, is finding the type of sound to use in this piece. It's such a beautiful melody in the low register, and it's so well written with the piano, and it just how it combines with the sound of the piano arpeggios and things. So to find a sound that isn't it's low, and so we think, oh, we've got to play louder to be heard, but actually, because it's so well written, you don't have to use such a strong sort of dark color. You can go for something a little bit more warm. And to find that sound, I like to do a little exercise where you go from a very, very hollow sound, so maybe think like souffle sound or de timbre sound, so nothing with any color in it at all, very sort of Trevor Y would say yellow sound, very pale, and then gradually try to introduce the color of the sound, or a little bit more timbre, into the sound, and find out how much you want of that mix. So you have like a pencil, you've got the lead part, which is the core, and that's your guide, and it writes for you. But we've also got the wood around the pencil. So how much of the outside of the sound do you want, and how much of that true core of the sound? So we need definitely some core so that the sound carries. But do we necessarily need something that's only core and not any of the sort of stuff around the outside? And that's what color, that's a way of practicing color for me. You can think about vowels as well, but it's also about how much of the core of the sound you've got in the sound that you choose. So can we all just try playing a G, which is the first note of the piece, and just do something very plain and pale, hollow sound. So thinking quite open in the lips, really warm air. So it's like you're fogging up a mirror. And if you were going to sing that, it would be something like very sort of airy vocal. So there's nothing sort of like that, but just so just try maybe singing it first and then playing a very hollow G. So the air is quite slow, and it's quite round with its quality. Now just introduce a little bit more of color through that, maybe bringing the lips slightly close together, thinking of the airspeed being a bit faster, and see how the color of the sound changes, and go to the extreme. So go all the way to something really dark and only core, but see if you can go through from very hollow to just core. Okay, so now let's see where, somewhere in the middle, or just towards the more of the hollow end, with just enough color in it to make the sound project. Let's see if we can find that sound that we want for this piece. So it's like a sound that sort of floats on a cloud. And it's not too heavy, but it's just rich enough. Okay, because there's plenty of places where the sound needs to be much darker, especially in the Presto section where it's more minor, G minor sort of color. But here we've got E flat major, and it's a nice sort of warm sound. Anyway, you can have an experiment with that. It's just something that I like to do first to find the sound. And then we use that sound in the warm-up tone exercises. So the first thing is going from the pickup G to the F. So we've got G, F, like that. And that is basically the Moyse sonority, except that one starts on a high B. Hello. So let's go from that G to an F with that warm sound that you found. Just do that one more time, really develop to the next note. So think maybe crescendo to the next note and then come away, and develop the vibrato a little bit. So something a little shimmer and then develop the vibrato a bit more onto the next note. Now let's go up a note. So we're going to do it chromatically, making the interval slightly wider because we need to practice bigger intervals, because the next one is quite a lot bigger than the first interval. So let's practice all the things in between that. So we're going from a second to a sixth. So let's do it chromatically up now. So we're going to start with G, F, then we'll do A flat F, A natural F, B flat F, and just keep going for an octave. Okay, let's go. 1, 2. Good. So always keep the sound that you've made on that G throughout that. So we don't want the color to change too much through those two notes. So we're developing the phrase, even though it's only 2-note phrase, but it's in the same color. So we don't want to change the story just yet. Next thing will be practicing going to low C because we have so many of them. So we've got to practice aiming our air down to that low C each time. So another chromatic exercise, but this time we're going to change the rhythm as well. So we're going to do it as crotchets first, like we did here. Then we'll do quaver and then semi-quaver, because we have in the variation of this melody, we've got to get there even quicker from a higher note as well. So let's do it as crotchets first. D flat is the first note, and again just going up chromatically. Hello. Okay, so D flat to C with crotchet to dotted minim. 1. Okay, so that covers at least that first A flat to C, and just keep going up because it will go from an F later on, but perhaps we don't have time to do it today. So we're going to just move on to doing a quaver now. So the same exercise, but with a quaver pickup. Ready? So it's da-dum. Okay, so you just got to make sure your air travels down enough in a quicker amount of time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. And then a semi-quaver, but let's just keep going up from there. So we're on A flat, like that. So ba-dum. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you just practice it as much as you need to. I would actually repeat each of those just to check that you can do it better on the second time. It's tricky when you're doing down to C because of the foot joint stuff, and you have to do it for E flat especially, otherwise it will sound like a D there. But on the other notes, you could start by just doing it without moving the pinky. Just say, for example, it was G to C. Just keep your finger on low C key, so you're not having to do that as well. So that would be the first step. So you're not having to move as many fingers. And then see if you can do it with the sliding motion of the pinky as well. Okay, so that's one exercise that will help with that dee-doo-doo-dee-dum, dee-doo-doo-dee-dum. going from a higher F down to low C quite fast. Good. Next one is where we have the variation of the melody. That's around bar 19. And just to practice that, doing an E flat major scale with that pattern of notes. So you do an octave for the first two notes of the triplet, and the last note is always B flat. So if we just do an octave of that, so it would go like something like that. Okay, so if we just do an octave of that up to E flat, just to practice those triplets, but make sure that the second and the third note of each triplet is softer than the first, because we want to hear the bass note as your melody note. That's ya-dee-da-dee-da-da. That's from the original melody. So we don't want 2 and 3 of the triplet to be stronger than that one. So you just need to make sure you go down, up, up, down, up, up, as you're doing the triplet. Okay, so let's try just an octave of E flat major with those triplets. Okay, let's do that one more time. 1, 2. Okay, I have written that out at the start, at least anyway, and that is on Facebook, my Facebook page, if you want to check that out, Roderick Seed Flute. Or if you want, you could probably just take a screenshot at any time. I'll just put it there. There we go. So if you take a screenshot at that point, you've got those that are very fast, especially around 106, where we have grace note, 186, sorry. That little bit there. So practice that same exercise, but only with the and this time make the octave louder. So it's forward and then back, wah, 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 like that. Should we just try that actually? So let's do an E flat major, octave leaps with a grace note. Ready, 1, 2. Good. And if you find that tricky to do that quickly, just practice it a much slower, and gradually make that quicker. A little, make it more snappy. Good. Other things that I would practice as a warm up for this piece. Obviously, you have that thing at the end, which you need to practice top high notes, but we have done a whole warm up on that, so I'm not going to do it here. But if you check one of the previous warm ups, note just to challenge us. The other thing I'd practice would be double tonguing, especially in the low register. It's quite difficult. If your blowing angle is a bit too high, we won't get a really good resonant low register with the tonguing. And just make sure that the tongue is quite relaxed and sort of not interrupting your air so much. We need a lot of space to create the depth of sound that we need in the low register. So I would do something like Tafnel and Gobert. First of all, just slur it and get the sound that you want. This might be a little darker than what we had at the beginning, so not so hollow, but more color in the sound. And then just do first of all single tonguing. Okay, and make sure that each one is with the sound that you want. And then do t and k, so tuka tuka tuka, 2 notes on each. And then do k, t, so backwards. And then try it again with normal double tonguing. And then you've got something to work with. Something on that one there. Also, we've got to practice going down to a low D quite quickly from a higher D. So do that sort of thing that we did with the octave, going up, but the same thing coming down. So yeah, those are some ideas for that one. Does anybody have any questions about the Enescu before we move on to other types of questions? If you do, just put it in the chat, and I'll try and answer them. And if you have any other questions, please do ask. So the one question that we've got here, is it possible you could talk a bit about singing and playing, as I am struggling with it at the moment? Okay, so singing and playing is quite odd when you do it at first, and it does take a bit of getting used to. But I would try to separate the elements, so the singing part, the playing part, and how you approach that on the flute. So you can sing and blow without your flute, and you'll still get the the piece we were doing was Cantabile and Presto by Enescu. But now we're just going to be talking about singing and playing for a little bit. So if you just sing any note, and just notice how you're free in the throat, you're free with the resonance here, and then just blow, and it's also free. Okay, now just start. So you blow first and introduce the voice to that. So and make sure that air's always coming out as you're singing. So you can test it with your hand there as well. It's difficult to do it the other way around, so to sing and then blow. So I would try it from blowing first. So that's always constant coming out. Then when you have your flute, just put your flute here. You've got a bit of a mental stimulus of having a flute here. So you might notice something in the breathing changes already. So you have to just like accept it and then say, no thanks. And just get back to having that free air. And then just sing with your flute here. Okay. And then you're just going to blow without any sound. And on each thing that we're doing, try and maintain your posture and your free air exchange, okay? So nothing gets in the way. Then gradually start blowing and making a sound. keep the air free again, but this time, whilst you're playing, try to introduce some voice into that. And if you find it hard to pitch the same note, you can do it an octave higher or lower, or you can do any note, really. The Robert Dick book talks about throat tuning, so it's trying to get the same note as that you're playing, and it helps the sound in that way as well. But for now, if you're struggling with it, just try any sort of sound with your voice, and that's better than nothing. And then you can try and, so you might want to change the note that you pick if you find it difficult to match that pitch. But for me, G is okay, so I'm going to do a G. So just play again, so just start blowing. And then you can do the opening melody. Okay, and then you can practice your melodies like that. How does playing and singing help? So there's quite a few benefits. The first is that you are accessing your resonance that you use when you sing. So if you sing a note, you can feel where it resonates around. It might be in the chest, it might be higher up in the head. And we need access to those when we play. We need this resonating chamber to be open, and that gives us a better, more free sound, where we're not having to try so hard, and the breathing is much better. The other benefit is that it helps release the jaw a bit more. So when we're singing and playing at the same time, you feel a lot of tingling and buzzing going on. And so that's where this is just, you're feeling all of this sort of get released in tension. And when you want to work on a phrase and you're not happy with how the sound is coming out, or you're not happy with the result of your phrase, often so much about flute, but we're just how we use our air to get somewhere in a phrase. And then you take the voice away, but you retain that feeling and that open feeling and the use of your air, and you'll just notice it straight away. It's like magic, really, but it does have scientific background as well. It's not simply a magic trick, but the trick is really to access that without singing first, because in a concert, obviously, you can't do that. Or you could do it very subtly if you're in a big orchestra. But yeah, so to do that, have that sort of memory of how it felt. So if you do singing and playing a lot in your practice, you'll notice how it feels, and then you'll remember that when you play, and it really helps. I haven't heard anybody do singing and playing and then they sound worse. So if it only makes you sound better, it's a good thing. But if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. It's your choice. But I get all my students to do it, and so they're used to doing weird and wonderful things. Okay, I've got one question that was sent by email, and I will answer that in a 1970s recording. Well, I think that's probably something to cover in a whole other warm-up video, because that isn't such a quick fix. It's a little bit like with the Presto here, it's low register articulation, and it's not letting the sound split. So it's making sure that the tongue doesn't influence how you're holding your jaw. So this has to be super relaxed, and the tongue has to rest quite comfortably, quite flat. And with the air, you don't want to force the air so much, but try and find the sound that you do when you slur. So for that bit, I always slur it. I do bell tones on a low E. So so just get used to articulating, even if it's that slow, making sure that the sound never jumps up. Because when you try and force the sound, you get all the harmonics out as well. So it's a case of doing less to do more. But I might do a whole video on that if that's something people would be interested in. But yeah, that's how I would approach that. I hope that helps a little bit. I got an email from somebody called Louise, and she wanted to ask about doing a forte piano, so going very softly after playing loud, and how to keep the quality of the note that is soft. And basically, I would practice your soft playing first, so holding a nice soft note, and we can do this together. And then it's just a case of injecting a loud pulse onto that. And it's a case of actually being quite coordinated with the jaw and your airstream. And so do it slower first and make it quicker. So for example, if we had like an A and just play that softly with really good airspeed, so not letting the sound get too hollow like we're doing at the beginning, but something with a real connection of the airstream constant. So if we just played an A like that. And then once you're happy with the sound that you get, start to make a loud, like we did with vibrato, but this time we're going to make sure the pitch doesn't change. So you just do a little pulse every now and again. So you can do it that gradually. So wow, wow, maybe over a minute, and gradually make that a little bit shorter. Okay, so you're practicing quick jaw movements with your air coming out a little stronger each time. And that's how I would practice forte piano. So just get your soft sound good first and make that your template. And then you've got the forte part is just a release of air and it's angled down, and then you come back to your soft playing. So that's how I practice forte pianos. That's just one of the questions. What else have we got? I agree with you on a regular basis, just out of interest. And if you do it, do you find it helps? Let's just have a quick poll. So do you do singing and playing? Does it help? For me, it's yes, yes. If I'm playing in the morning and I just sound quite average or the sound's not quite there, I do singing and playing for about 5 minutes and it starts to get better. Sometimes instantaneously, other times it's more slow, depends how I'm playing that day. Yes, 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 all the time, especially in jazz. Okay. Yes, but not as much as I should. Okay, so I could do another video, warm-up video with singing and playing if that would help. We can go over it again in more detail, but I think if you practice it in that way where you're doing each separate item, so the blowing part, the singing part, bringing your flute up, noticing any differences, making sure that you're blowing constantly throughout and singing with with a good volume as well. It's not something that you usually do that quietly, so but you can still try it quietly. But it helps find the support of your sound. Okay, so I'll do it next week probably. And other things that have been requested are the Reichert daily exercises. If you have those, I might look through a couple of those, how I practice them, to practice various things such as intervals, dynamics, sound, all that stuff. Mozart G major, somebody wants some exercises for that and how to practice it. And Etude of the Week on Facebook are doing the Donjon studies, salon etudes. They've just done number 1, and I think somebody wanted a practice guide on that. So I might do something on the Donjon study number 1 or number 2. It will be number 2 next week. And if you're not a member of the Etude of the Week on Facebook, I do recommend joining. It's a very nice community, and you all play a book of studies. And I think there's about 6,000 people who are now part of that. So it's an amazing thing. Do you sing the note you're playing? Usually, yeah. Or if I'm doing that high register exercise we did yesterday, I will do an arpeggio. That's an exercise I learned from Lorna McGee, is just to find your low voice with a high register note, which gives you the best of both worlds, basically. So you've got depth of sound, free airstream, open resonance, but also fast airspeed. So I sometimes sing an arpeggio with one note, but usually within that key. So if it's a top G, I'd sing a G major arpeggio. Most of my pupils find singing difficult. Okay. Yeah. If you're doing oral exams, they are quite terrifying for when you're a kid. But I think actually that would help if you do singing and playing and make it fun and embrace the fact that it's a bit of a goofy exercise. You can make that fun, and when they actually come to sing on their own, it's not such a big deal. And I would try to just introduce it gradually every lesson. Just make it something like a little checkup. How's the singing going? Or try and sing through a simple piece or a scale. Something like that. Can you do a warm up on double tonguing and breathing in Mendelssohn's Scherzo? Oof. Well, that's going to take a whole video as well. I'm sure many of you have practiced that solo hundreds of times. So I could do some tips on that. So that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, Etude of the Week is a brilliant group. That declining arpeggio is tricky. Yeah, I mean, you could make it a bit simpler if you did just an octave jump with the singing, or you could sing purely just the lowest G that you can sing if you're playing a high G. You don't have to do the arpeggios. I think Lorna just does that because she's super talented and can do anything. Yeah, but it's one of those exercises that stuck in my brain after she demonstrated it. It's really useful. Okay, double-tongued passage in the Pulong. Okay, so maybe a video on double tonguing, including some examples from those pieces, and triple tonguing would be included in the Prokofiev on low notes, I think. So that's a good idea. I learned to play it on a wooden riddle cart. Oh, the Pulong. Nice. Good. So that's quite, I think that, oh, it's 41 minutes. So that's the longest video yet. But thank you so much for your questions. And if you do have any more, please just put them in a comment, and I do check them. So, or you can email me, or via my website, something like that, or Facebook, anything, and I'll try and answer all those when they come through. So have a good weekend, and see you for some double tonguing next week.